Hey, I see me. I'm doing a show. I'm doing a show when I wanna, cause I wanna, all that stuff. How's everybody doing? I know I was sitting here distracted because that intro is way shorter than the other one. I thought we were starting a 2-minute clock. So we're doing this just because I wanna, and there may be more because I wanna, both from me and from everybody else. So thanks everybody for tuning in. I've got a debate tomorrow, and I'm debating a Muslim apologist on Modern Day Debates at noon. So yes, it's another. I get to sleep an hour later than I did for last week's debate, but it's another debate, another one on Islam, and I have specific notes about it. What I'm wanting to do tonight, real quick, is maybe if I can find a way to do it and get it up on screen. It's been suggested that maybe we make a bingo card, like an Islamic debater bingo card. But I also want to get feedback from people on what you can feel free to call in, or you can do it in chat or super chat as we start talking about that stuff. What's been your experience with engaging with Muslim apologists? And with a debate title like, is Islam true? What does that mean to you? What are you thinking about? What gets in your head? Because when I've done these debates before about whether or not Islam is true, what's rational, what's rational, it has always been, by me, a teaching exercise to talk about rationality, reason, evidence, argument, because it's not just about the doctrinal stuff. In this case, though, I wanted to have as good of an understanding as I could of the specific tenets that this guy would be defending. But we already have calls on the line, and there are two of them that were here even before I talked about the topic. They've been screened and everything else. I'm going to take these two, and then I'm going to get back to trying to focus on debate press stuff and debate prep information there. So these two calls are going to have absolutely nothing to do with debate prep for tomorrow at all. But Nick in Ohio, pronouns are he and him, says that atheism and veganism are identical in structure and motivation. So welcome to the line, because I wanna.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, I guess basically, I guess I should mention that I think that veganism is not necessarily, like, the reason to believe veganism isn't because this isn't an argument for veganism. This is just, I think, an argument for the motivation for, I guess, why people should care about this.
Well, so I'm confused, Nick. Are you an atheist?
Yes, an atheist.
Are you a
and
vegan?
A vegan.
You're an atheist
Yes.
and a vegan, and your position that atheism and veganism are identical in structure and motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
So, okay.
Atheism is the rejection of a claim of theism that hasn't met its burden of proof, that is also a rejection of supernatural causation. This is the motivation. There could be anything. You could be an atheist for good reasons or bad reasons, but my motivation is based on what I perceive as proper epistemology with regard to truth.
Sure.
It's theism, atheism. Those are truth things. Veganism is a position of accepting a proposition specifically about the rights and values of non-human animals and advocating for no unnecessary harm or use of non-human animals. There may be some motivation may
that would be
involve,
our first point of disagreement.
Motivation may involve equivocating on what isn't necessary harm. But even if you are right that atheism and veganism were somehow identical in structure, who the fuck cares? You can have identical structure. Obviously, the motivation isn't the same. So what's the point, and why are we spending any of my precious time on a Friday night talking about this shit?
Well, I mean, I guess, so I would say that it's not any sort of acceptance of a claim. I would say that it is the null hypothesis, and that it is the rejection of the special pleading, right? So, like, if we just consider that we have moral duties towards conscious beings, that we're in some way attempting to maximize their well-being.
You don't just get to assert that.
I'm sorry.
You can try and spin this any way you want. I'm on record as saying that veganism is morally virtuous. It's not a moral duty. Theism and atheism are about a claim about what actually exists with and without the material world.
Right.
Veganism is a value assessment. Those aren't even in the same ballpark. You are doing your best to try to make two things that are not identical in structure be identical in structure. And even if they were, what difference would that fucking make?
Well, it would just be that it's an analogous position. One of them is
I don't give
and
a
the other
shit.
is not.
This is,
Sure.
I tell you what, Nick, I'm completely bored. I'm going to move on to another call. Thanks.
All right. Well,
nothing. You don't get to call in and say that two things that are analogous, roughly, are identical when they're not. That's just not the way this is going to work. And I'm not spending my Friday night dealing with another self-righteous vegan who wants to suggest that veganism and atheism need to go hand in hand. And if they don't, there's some problem with that. Fine. That's your life. Go and live it. That's your value judgment. Go and live it. I care about truth. Siobhan in Missouri, pronouns she, her, has a question for me unrelated to the debate. So how you doing?
Hi, big fan. Glad to speak to you. Thank you for taking the call.
We'll fix that pretty quickly.
Well, okay, so I've heard you say in a lot of your videos that people don't choose what they believe. And that struck me as curious because I remember from when I was a Christian, I mean, I often came across some argument that, challenged my belief in God. The cognitive choice I was making was not to undergo the process of evaluating that evidence because it might disprove what I wanted to believe. So I'm not understanding how that's different from choosing what to believe.
Because you're not choosing the belief. I've said this about 5,000 times and answered it on hundreds of shows. Belief of a proposition is not merely the result of a simple choice. You can act and choose what sort of information you're going to rely on in the meta level, in the secondary level and stuff like that. But you don't just say, I'm going to decide to believe X. That doesn't happen.
Okay. No,
I mean, you can decide to,
I think I get what you mean.
for example, we know that Fox News isn't a news source. Fox News is nothing but propaganda and sales. They are paid liars who have admitted to lying and spreading misinformation that they knew to not be true. I don't listen to Fox News because I don't consider them a trustworthy source. That's a decision that I made. The motivation for that decision could be to have protected my beliefs from that. But the motivations, like for a proposition, vaccines cause diarrhea. That is a factual claim about the world. And I can't merely say I am convinced of that, because the belief is the state of being convinced. And becoming convinced is the result of a process. And it's not just a decision. I can't just say, I'm going to decide today to believe that vaccines do this. But I can say, as people start to present information, I can say, no, I won't listen to those sources. And maybe I have made a conscious decision to try to protect my default position. That's different. Maybe I've legitimately been convinced that the sources that they're going to present are problematic. All of the various reasons, the inventory of reasons that go into how and why I pay attention to different sources may represent a bias, but I'm not aware of in any case where a proposition could merely be, I am now convinced as an act of volition or will.
Right. Yeah, I'm following that. Thank you. Actually, that helps. I see the distinction you mean.
Yep, that's all it is.
Thank you so much for taking my call, and have a great day.
Sure. Thanks, Siobhan. All right. There's a lot more here, and I'm gonna keep lines. I'm gonna keep taking calls, and I'm gonna try and go rapid fire. Let me tell you a little bit about the debate first today, because I said I'd do that after the first two calls, and we knocked out the first two calls in like 9 minutes because I wouldn't have bothered taking it. The veganism and atheism are essentially the same structure. It's just nonsense. You might as well say they're both beliefs. I believe X and I believe Y, and therefore, since I believe X and Y, who cares? It's going to annoy me for a while at the boneheadedness of people who are desperately trying to argue for something and doing an absolutely piss poor job of it. So the debate tomorrow, and by the way, I realize before anybody writes in, my debate opponent may in fact watch this. And one of the first things that pops into people's minds is probably, hey, if you go through the types of things that you're going to be talking about in your opening, can't your opponent just prepare for that? Yeah. And it'd be damn nice if somebody did. It'd be really good if I opened up my debate prep and said, okay, tomorrow's debate is on, is Islam true? And I can tell you right now that in my opening statement, I'm going to spend some amount of time, probably small, because I don't want to distract from the key aspects of the debate, talking about what it means to say whether or not something is true. What does that mean to you? Are you going with the correspondence model where truth is that which corresponds to reality? Are you going with a coherence model? Are you going with a pragmatic model, et cetera? There's like 5 or so different models of truth with things underneath it. I'm not digging into that in depth because by and large, when we say something is true, if I made a list of 10 statements that we all accept are true and 10 statements that we all accept are not true and 10 statements with perhaps undetermined truth values, that would be 3 categories. True, or perhaps maybe we should say verified and accepted as true, verified and accepted as false, unknown truth values. And for all the things that might be listed as unknown truth values, whether they ultimately are true or false, they are not in the true category. And so we can say it's true that the Earth spins on its axis and orbits the sun. Those are verifiably true. It's false that the Earth is flat. I know. I'm going to get a flat earther calling at any moment. Whatever. It is true, in my estimation, that the God claims have not met their burden of proof. If they had met their burden of proof, then they would not be permitted or prohibited from being used as evidence in court. Modern courts no longer accept what's called spectral evidence. You don't get to appeal to the supernatural. You don't get to say that ghosts and fairies and all these things exist and are real. You can talk about what your experience is, and you can say in court that you are convinced that you've had an experience where the Holy Spirit conveyed information to you, but you do not get to submit the information as true on the grounds that it stems from the Holy Spirit, and you cannot submit that it's true that the Holy Spirit talked to you. All we can talk about is this is your assessment of the situation. And so the specific tenets of Islam that are intended to be defended tomorrow. 1, Islam is the last message of God. There will be no more messages or messengers after Muhammad. That's the first one, the primary one. The second one is that Islam cannot be man-made. And the third one is that Islam, or the Quran, is infallible. Now, I'm going to take another couple calls here in a minute, and we'll talk about those things and more, but we're going to keep coming back to this because I think it's easiest to divide those into 3. Islam is the last message of God. There will be no more messages or messengers after Muhammad. Boom, 1. Number 2, Islam cannot be man-made. And number 3, the Quran is infallible. Now, those 3, even if so first of all, you'd have to show that Islam is a message from God before you can say it's the last message from God. So I don't know how you demonstrate that it's in fact a message from God or that it's the last message from God. But Christianity could say that Christianity is the last message from God. There will be no more messages after Jesus, or in this case, Paul, since Paul and the apostles were involved in it. You could do the same with Judaism. That Judaism is the last message of God and Christianity is false. You can do this for any of them. This is an assertion. I don't know how you demonstrate it. And I don't know how you can demonstrate when your principal reason for thinking that Islam is true is tied to what you assert will not happen in the future. And so what you're doing is you're saying God will never and could never have another message or messenger, which is a convenient way of fighting off future religions that did exactly what your religion's done in the past. The second tenet that he thinks shows Islam is true is that Islam cannot be man-made. Well, that's nonsense. There's absolutely nothing here that couldn't have been man-made. I don't know how you determine that anything other than human minds are required for this, but good luck trying. And the third is that the Quran is infallible. And all three of these positions that this individual wants to defend must in fact be true in order to say that Islam is true. This is why I had asked ahead of time what conditions or what tenets was he willing to defend. So step number one for anybody who wants in on it, the Quran is infallible. If you can find one error in the Quran, then the Quran isn't infallible and the debate is over. If Islam is true, requires that the Quran be infallible, and you find any flaw with the Quran, then the whole case cascades and falls apart from there. But we will get back to debate prep for Is Islam True? I've got, I'm not even reading these. I just have tons of lines full. We have Oliver in Kentucky. Doesn't know if he's a theist or an atheist. So how you doing, Oliver? Welcome to the line. You're on Cus I Wanna.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm going to hang up if you ask that one more fucking time.
Hello?
Goodbye. All right. Fabio in Florida, pronouns are he, him, as a theist, wants to know if we have gender roles or norms based on evolution and not society. How you doing, Fabio?
Hey,
Welcome to the line.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for taking my call and thanks for welcoming me. So yeah, I guess that well, he actually wrote out what I was gonna ask pretty well. So I guess that was pretty much, I was gonna ask like if there's evolutionarily evolved sort of like, norms for and differences between men and women.
Well, in what way? I mean, of course, there are in any sexually dimorphic species, there are differences, and those differences do impact the roles that tend to be served, but they don't necessarily dictate those roles, and the roles that are adopted don't necessarily indicate which, if any, gender is being represented. So so sex and sexuality and chromosomes and gametes go to propagation, and that's all that evolution is. Well, evolution isn't really focused on anything as if it's an agent, but it's what natural selection would decide carries on. But the roles and duties and presentation that people have within society, or any creature has within society, is a social construct beyond just the evolutionary roles. So I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So like, for instance, like evolutionary psychologists claim that males are thought to be more like willing to engage in like casual sex because they can greatly increase their reproductive output by doing so. Whereas like women, on the other hand, females, benefit more from being like more choosy and selective due to like the demands of pregnancy and breastfeeding.
Okay.
So like in other words, I guess the field of evolutionary psychology sort of claims that we have like differences in our predispositions towards different things, which could be like intuitive. Is that something like that you like know, or would you agree or disagree with, or?
Well, there are behaviors that are both impacted by our physiology and by our social structures. Sure. I'm still not sure what's the point of what you're asking.
Oh, I was just like sort of like if there's like tendencies, there's like differences between like men and women. They're like intuitive tendencies, I guess.
There are broadly speaking, as generalizations, there are differences between the various genders. That doesn't tell us anything about what necessarily is expected. And generalizations are how you get to stereotypes and norms. They are not about individuals and who they are and what they are. So, of course, everything that led to us now, of course, that impacts the roles and stuff we take on in society. What's the point?
Okay. Oh, okay.
I mean,
okay. So I guess
I'm sitting here trying to do debate prep, and I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, and I'm trying to figure out what you're calling about.
Oh no, I guess I just wanted to like know your general thoughts on that. I guess it wasn't like too deep or anything like that.
Okay.
I don't really know if I have anything else to ask, and I don't want to waste your time. So thank you for the call, man.
Sure, thanks. Calls like that confuse me. They and I don't want to accuse him of anything, but they seem particularly disingenuous. Like, on a whim a few hours ago, or maybe a little, we talked about it on Wednesday, but I decided a couple hours ago to come on and do debate prep prior to tomorrow's debate on Islam. And because we're on the line, we take calls, and somebody calls in to see what my thoughts are on whether it wasn't even clear, evolution or society and evolutionary psychologists. The interaction of human beings is complex and worth studying. Do you think evolution impacted the roles that we take on? Yeah. Do you think society impacted it? Yeah. Do you think evolution impacted our society? Yeah. I'm just like, what the hell's going on? It's fine. It's just, I really wish there was like a clear thought there, but here we go. Tyler in New York, Pronzer Him, you're on the line because I wanna. Welcome.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having me.
How you doing?
Doing fairly well. I'm just calling in with a quick question. I'm an atheist myself and also very much pro-choice, and I wanted to ask you how you would respond to a particular argument that pro-lifers would provide in response to the bodily autonomy argument.
Sure.
So I was having a conversation with a relative who is very much pro-life, and I am not. And they raised an analogy of the hot air balloon, and I was a little confused at first, but then they started to explain it. Are you familiar with that argument that they would use, the hot air?
Nope.
Sorry?
No, go ahead.
So essentially what they were saying was, imagine that you invite somebody on a hot air balloon, and then in the middle of your trip, you decide that you no longer want to have that person on the hot air balloon. Are you free to eject that person from the hot air balloon, kick them off because you no longer consent to having them there? And the point that they're raising is that there's other considerations besides your consent. And I didn't know how to respond to that, and I just wanted to see how you would respond to that.
If somebody got pregnant, does that mean they invited someone to use their uterus for 9 months?
No.
No. So there you go. Analogy ended. If I invite someone on a hot air balloon, I'm entering a contract with another human being who's a person with rights, and I'm saying, I'd like you to come on a hot air balloon with me. And that carries with it the onus that I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that you are there for the entire ride, and that I'm not going to murder you halfway through the ride. It's a shitty analogy, because what actually happens is consent to sex isn't consent to pregnancy necessarily. It's consent to the risk of pregnancy, along with all the options that are available. Consent to pregnancy isn't consent to remaining pregnant, because that's the way pregnancy runs, and you can stop your consent anytime. You should ask them, maybe in return, if somebody consents to have sex with you, do they have the right to stop having sex with you at any point after that? Or do they have to see it through to your completion and your satisfaction just because they agreed to have sex with you? Because that's closer to the analogy of the hot air balloon, where two thinking agents are agreeing to participate in an activity, and one of them gets to stop. And the fact of the matter is, while it would be murder and a problem if you were to throw them out of a hot air balloon, it's absolutely an exercise of independent bodily autonomy to say, you know what, I agreed to have sex, we're in the middle of having sex, and now I'm done having sex, pack your shit and get out of my house. That's perfectly permissible.
All right, I appreciate it. I suspected that this call would be pretty short. I just wanted to see how you would respond. So thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I wish anybody, I don't care if you're an atheist, if you're a theist, I don't care if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you're just able to put together a question that we can then discuss and move on. Cool. Awesome. We have, is it Nina in Uganda? Pronouns are she, her?
Yes. Yes.
Welcome,
hello.
Nina.
Thank you. So I heard a question. Basically, it goes as what's right or wrong? Being vocal about a human right for awareness or being silent about a human right for safety? In the context, basically in Uganda, there is a new bill that's ready to be amended, but the current, the government has given us an opportunity to defend our case in Parliament. But the issue is that we are scared. Either we should just keep silent about it, or we go vocal about it.
And what's the bill?
It's an anti-LGBTQIA bill that's being passed, whereby it's life imprisonment if you fall in the category.
So the Ugandan government is proposing a bill to make it illegal to be in any way LGBTQ, and
yes.
and then you go to life in prison.
Yes.
And you're, I want to make sure I understand that. And then your question is, how do you get involved? And I'm not sure what your question is.
So my question is basically, what's right or wrong? Is it right for us to be vocal about our position and go to Parliament and defend our position? Or is it right for us to actually be safe about our, protect ourselves and be safe? Because there's a possibility that after having that debate, they could arrest us.
Okay. So a bill's been proposed and you're against it and you'd like to oppose it, but if the bill passes, you could have outed yourself for life imprisonment.
Yes, they proposed the bill, the president signed the bill, they proposed it in Parliament, and Parliament accepted it, and there was supposed to vote, but we were very vocal about it, and we brought out the human rights perspective about it, so they closed out all human rights offices in Uganda. But later on, when other countries started pressurizing the government, so they decided to have a debate with us to defend our position.
So
yeah, so the question is about, is it right for us to actually have to speak out about it, or is it way better for us to keep silent about it and be safe?
So I'm not going to know what the right answer is because I don't know enough about the actual risks to you. I don't know anything about the Ugandan government. I would think that the best course of action would be to reach out to the United Nations and humanitarian organizations that deal with international law on this to try to get support and lobby and people to lobby from outside Uganda and get advice from legal experts, because I'm not going to be comfortable saying, yes, you have to fight that. That's the morally right thing to do, because you could be putting yourself and your family and all of your friends at risk of imprisonment or death. And similarly, I don't want to be in a position of saying, no, it's best for you to stay back and not put yourself at risk. I would like to say to reach out to those organizations, and if anybody in chat's got a link that they can pose real quick for Nina here, that would be great, because the humanitarian efforts that are needed to stand up to a government that's willing to do this, I don't even begin to know. And
yeah, that's the problem we have. They banned all human rights organizations in Uganda. The human rights law, there was one just banned about a week ago. It was removed from Uganda, so there is nowhere we can run to, because the majority of the law firms in Uganda are still in sync with the government. And the other thing, the police works with the government, the military works with the government. Basically, there's no one to run to. And when you go to the American embassy here, you pass via the military for Uganda to actually reach to the embassy.
Yeah. I think my instinct is for you to make sure that you and your friends and family and the people who oppose this stay safe, because if you're on an airplane and the oxygen masks drop, they always advise you to put on your own mask first and then help others with theirs. Because if you're busy trying to put theirs on, you could pass out and then they both lose help. I think something similar is the case here, where if you feel that you can safely stand up and oppose these things, do. But if it's a greater risk to stand up, then it's probably better for you to take the step back, as sad as it is, make sure that you remain safe and the other people with you who oppose this remain safe, and to work behind the scenes with other organizations to try to fix this. I have no idea how to fix this. I barely know how to fix and the government in my country, and we're not doing too well at that. I have a hard time doing it for countries where I don't know what's going on, and I'm not involved.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I am really sorry. And please, if you find a solution, and if you find organizations and want to pass on that information, you can always call into this show and to other shows where there are allies and promote stuff that way. I'll be an underground network for Uganda and passing information along, if that's the only way that we can act to end this, is kind of behind the scenes.
Yes, basically you've helped me a lot to learn a lot of things, because the majority of people in Uganda are religious, mostly the Abrahamic religion, and Christianity is the more prevalent one in the country.
Yep.
So the whole entire argument is God put man and woman. That's the context of their argument.
Yep. And it's unfortunate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nina. And please call back, messages, let us know if anything improves or if you need help or if we can help out. Or right now, that's the best I've got. I appreciate your call, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. I will reach out.
Yeah. Wow. All of a sudden, a debate on whether Islam is true seems very unimportant at the moment. And yet, that's what's happening. That's what I'm going to have to prepare for tomorrow. Yeah, you got to keep yourself safe and do what you can to help others be safe. If they're even going so far as to prevent you from leaving Uganda and seeking refuge elsewhere, I don't know what to do in those cases. My country is a shambles right now, politically speaking, but I'm still able to live my daily life, and I have some freedoms. There's considerable concern that if governors like DeSantis keep having their way and keep focusing on attacking the LGBT community and taking away rights and pretending as if, as if drag queens are the problem. I saw a meme that would probably piss off a lot of people. It showed a bunch of Catholic priests in their robes and said, "These are the men in dresses that are the real harm to your children." And it's true. It's undeniably true. I'm in an incredibly privileged position because I'm a middle-aged, middle-class, cishet white guy who's largely able-bodied. It doesn't matter whether I'm broke or anything else. It is, I get to speak, and I live under a government where I still get to vote, where I get to speak out against the government, where right now I'm currently not likely to be arrested merely for speaking my mind, and certainly not for, being who I am or being around other people or supporting and being allied with, the LGBTQ community, whatever. But as they keep going, there's a real possibility that my current relationship might become illegal, depending on who gets in charge and what the definitions are and how they try to attack different rights. I mean, I got loads of advantages, and yet my partner's trans. And what's that going to mean? What are the laws that are going to impact that? Right now, people will be like, oh, look, there's real problems in Uganda and you guys are just fighting on Twitter. Yeah, I don't tend to fight on Twitter. I end up shutting it down and just blocking people left and right because I can't tell the difference between someone who's an idiot, someone who's hateful, someone who's a troll, and someone who's potentially all three. And none of it matters because laws aren't passed on Twitter. But people are influenced in their thinking on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, things like this. And all I can keep doing is try to keep doing what I can to get information out there, to try to influence minds as best I can. And hope for the best. We've got another couple calls, and I'm going to get to them here in just a minute. And also, we'll probably just do like all super chats that come in at the end here. I'm not planning to go more than 90 minutes because, as it turns out, I don't know that we're actually going to get all that much debate prep done. Don't put your debate prep stuff necessarily in super chats. I'm not just sitting here saying, oh, for $5, you can tell me what's wrong with Islam and I'll read that off or whatever else. Genuinely, I'm looking, if you are a regular listener to the show, if you've watched the last few debates that I've done on Islam and you felt that there was something that got missed or overlooked or something that you thought you might like to see addressed, pick up the phone and call in, drop it in. I'll take a note on it. In the meantime, because we've got callers, I want to take all of them. And so Brian in Hawaii, where I guess is it just Friday afternoon right now in Hawaii. Brian, thanks so much for calling. You're on the line with Matt.
It is. Aloha Friday, Matt.
Aloha.
I have a question basically regarding, I guess it comes back to consciousness. And so the question for you that I would have is it possible that there is a level of consciousness or levels of consciousness that we as humans initially when we're born that we don't have access to? Do you think that's possible?
I don't know. I don't even know what is meant by levels of consciousness. I would say that if instead of levels, which sounds like a hierarchical structure, if you would say that there's varying degrees of awareness and understanding, sure. But that doesn't mean that, like, basically I'm acknowledging there's all kinds of things within the universe that I don't know. But that's different from what a lot of people tend to mean by levels of consciousness. Like, so there are people who think the universe is a hive mind, or we're part of a hive mind, or you can communicate telepathically, or people think they are spiritual entities that are going to exist after their bodies are dead. And I don't see any good reason to believe in any of those things. So I'm not quite sure what you're getting at. It says here, you feel like you're God.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my question, because I'm a unique individual, I guess, in that I do remember before I was born, in the sense that I do remember being in the womb, and I do remember being born, and everything that everyone around me says occurred when I was born. Also, I have that personal memory, which is odd. So at first I thought, well, that must be some glitch or something. I must be remembering something that's not true. But then I got into meditation fairly deeply and discovered myself that there is another level of consciousness that transcends this reality. And the only way I was able to discover that was in deep meditation. I think there are drugs that can get you into other mind states, but this was not with drugs at all. This was just in meditation and silence.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You remember being in the womb, and when you consider whether or not that's a real memory or an invented memory, you confirmed that it was a real memory with meditation.
Correct.
What's the demonstration that meditation is a viable method for determining the truth of memory?
A good question. It goes back
It's
to,
the
I
best
think,
question. It's the one that you should have asked.
Yeah.
It's funny that God has to call me to find out how to properly investigate whether or not his memory of the womb is real.
But what if I guess where I'm going with this, and I think
we don't need to go to what ifs, Brian, we don't need to go to what ifs.
Yep.
I'm asking you, what's the demonstration? What's the mechanism? What's the evidence that shows that meditation is sufficient to confirm memories?
I would say right now we don't have that. I think in consciousness,
exactly.
we
So
continue
you
to
have
discover what,
no, stop. You have what you thought was a memory. You used a method for which you have no reason and no evidence to think would actually be reliable in verifying that memory. And that is how you get to confirmation bias. That is how you get to self-deception and delusion. You convinced yourself that you found a method that confirmed your memories. And then when asked the very simple question of how do you know that's true, you don't. So the issue here is you have what you believe are memories. They may be correct. They may not be correct. Even if you can remember to the womb, that doesn't tell you anything at all about previous life or your existence as a god or anything else. That would be an interesting curiosity that we would then need to explain. I don't have memories that go back to the womb, but I might have at age 6 months. Maybe those memories fade. Given what we know about how the brains form and when a theory of mind and a theory of self come about, it could be the case that your memories of the womb are false. It could be the case that they're true and that you are an anomaly, but that has nothing to do with levels of consciousness. You haven't got a method to test for it. And even if you could show that meditation was a reliable way to confirm your memories of the womb, and now your memories of the womb are confirmed and real, which is not the case, what does that tell you?
Right. And that's part of the problem I have with expressing how you can know things through meditation. It's one of the things that I personally am not comfortable with, this whole woo-woo, let's go in and see what we can find through meditation, which is why I was surprised that this occurred. I'm a naturalist. There's nothing in me that would think, gosh, I think this means something. But in meditation, in the silence, memories of the womb came back and other memories that I didn't know I had. So I don't know what it all means. I just think there might be another level or some other part of me,
Yeah, you don't know what they are. You don't even know that they're memories. You don't know that they represent another level of consciousness. This is no offense, because I'm not. Hi, Daphne. Thank you for climbing up here in the middle of the show. I'm not suggesting, and you avoided or said there wasn't drug use involved, but this is the kind of bong hit philosophy discussions. It's like, hey man, what if there's other levels of consciousness? What if there's something, about this? I've done this. Everybody's done this. Everybody's sit around and speculate about this. The difference is, what if means jack shit to reality until it's confirmed. And so while, it may be fun to, and the speculation about what may be possible can be very useful in gaining a better understanding about the world. It's a thought experiment at best. And if it's not a thought experiment that can provide something useful, I don't need to sit around and talk about it. I mean, if you want to do a bong rip sometime, get some legal Delta 8 and sit around going, hey man, what if? I'm down. That's not where the show is. That's not reality. It does us no good. You might as well be saying, you know, like, this is the atheist equivalent of how many angels can dance on a pinhead type thing. And maybe worse. But anyway,
yeah,
you're as far as I can tell, Brian, you're not God. And if you come up with a better way to show that you're God, you should be able to contact me without even calling in.
Hopefully telepathically, right?
Yeah, when I start getting messages from you confirming that you're God, cool. And it'll save us a call on the line. Thanks, Brian. I'm just, you know, I got no problem with, I love interesting thoughts. Maybe this is a way to explain it. I remember when the first Matrix movie came out. I liked it a lot. But as someone who'd already at least tentatively begun looking into philosophical ideas about solipsism and things like that, you know, the new evil demon and things, thought experiments like that, it wasn't a, oh my God moment, like for me, like it was for some other people. And the rest of the series after the first Matrix one, after Matrix, The Matrix, was kind of crap. I stopped watching after a little while. You guys want more Daphne. I'll get around to more Daphne someday. I'm no longer interested in the what ifs in the way that I used to be. It's like, oh, is this possible? Maybe. Possibility needs to be demonstrated. Yeah, but wouldn't it be cool if? Yeah, it probably would be cool. And, you know, there's certain, I'm a big fan of the Marvel universe. Lots of stuff there that would be really cool. There's lots of stuff that would not be cool if that's the way reality worked. Yeah, I'm not as interested in doing the show where it's like, we have millions of people who are convinced that they are the special creation of the one true God, and that their duty is to support that notion, both financially and with voting. That their duty is to represent that religious belief publicly, mainly as much as is convenient, since most of them don't actually live their lives according to that. But at least to give it lip service and to vote. And in the process of doing this, they are legislating away the rights of others. They can't let anybody else be. They're a bunch of nosy, busybody fuckwits, and they're dangerous. And some of them are governors, and some of them are representatives and senators and presidents. In that world where we've lost the Supreme Court, where Roe has been overturned, where 3 Texas women are now being sued for facilitating an abortion, that news item hit today. I could pull up. Let me pull up the clip here. A Texas man is suing 3 women under the wrongful death statute. This is from the Texas Tribune, alleging that they assisted his ex-wife in terminating her pregnancy. The short version of this is Marcus Silva is being represented by Jonathan Mitchell, the former Texas Solicitor General and architect of the state's prohibition on abortion after about 6 weeks. And State Representative Briscoe Cain, a Republican from Deer Park. The lawsuit's in Galveston County, and he alleges that his ex-wife learned she was pregnant in July, the month after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and conspired with 2 friends to illegally obtain abortion-inducing medication and terminate the pregnancy. So now there are 3 women involved in this lawsuit, the specifics of which are kind of murky because the state's trigger laws, which make abortion a crime punishable by up to life in prison, didn't go into effect until August, and the abortion took place in July, but Roe was overturned before July. And so that they're, Attorney General Ken Paxton has claimed that the state's pre-abortion bans, which punish anyone who performs or furnishes the means for an abortion by up to 5 years in prison, went into effect the day after Roe was overturned in June. And so you've got 3 women who are now being sued by one man because they helped his ex-wife, or the wife that he was in the process of aborting, facilitate a chemical abortion. That's the world we live in. Now, don't get me wrong. I still like to have fun. Aron and I do all kinds of stuff for fun. We had friends over. We played board games. I love playing board games. I have a massive collection. We have our snakes, our reptiles, our rats. We love going to reptile conventions. This is not the Chicken Little sky is falling into the world. But now, as we've heard, Uganda has to be added to my list of conscious travesties around the world. And so on that front, if you think you have memories from the womb, cool. Call somebody else. If you think you're God, if you can prove it, give me a call. But if you think you're God and you're calling to ask me how you can prove it, you're not God. If you think you're God and you're wanting to check with me to see if you're being reasonable, you are not God. I am. In that scenario, I would be God because I'm the guy that God turns to. How absolutely ridiculous. All right. We got loads of callers, and I want to make sure we go ahead and take them all. So we'll set aside any other debate prep stuff, although if you guys get questions in, I'll take calls for at least another 10, 15 minutes or so, and then we'll maybe at 8:15 we'll go through the super chats. But Jack in Illinois thinks there's a higher law, but not a higher lawgiver. Hey, welcome, Jack. You're on the line. What do you mean by higher law?
Hi there. So essentially, what I'm trying to figure out is if sorry, I get super nervous when I'm talking to people on the phone, but
that makes for a bad call-in show. So let me ask this. A higher law that is higher than what?
I guess just the typical the laws given by the typical person over the different societies of people over time.
Sure. So when the founders of the United States appealed to providence as the inalienable rights of man as the foundation of law, you're saying that perhaps the laws the government make are one thing, and those and above that is perhaps moral law or something like that. Is there something above that?
Above the laws of man?
Well, above like providence, the abstract concept that people appealed to. Maybe I'll just stop for a second and you say for like 30 seconds or so, whatever it is that you thought the point was before I asked any questions. Because if you had something that you wanted to say and I cut it short by asking a question, that might be getting in the way. So let's restart. Jack's calling in from Illinois. His pronouns are he, him. Hi, Jack. Say whatever you want.
Okay, so I've been wondering if there is a way to synthesize my belief in a potential higher law with my belief that there is no higher lawgiver.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are these prescriptive laws?
I would say yes.
Do you have an example of one?
I guess just that there are certain laws that, or certain things that we can observe cause suffering across space and time that different societies have recognized and codified. And perhaps
when I ask for an example, saying there are certain laws that across space and time that different societies have codified, all I asked for was an example.
Oh, sorry. I guess just like laws that cause harm, such as assault or murder or rape, things like that.
Okay. Let's just go with, because what I was asking for was an example of a law, and then you said laws that cause harm or assault or rape. So let's say that an example of the higher law that you're kind of talking to is, it is wrong to punch someone in the face without warrant. And your view is, if that is a higher law, is it possible that that higher law is viable without a lawgiver, even though it's prescriptive? Is that the question?
I would say that that is a fairly accurate description, yes. And I think I'm starting to understand.
So my answer is yes.
Where my contention might
there
be
doesn't
coming
have
from.
to be. My answer is yes. There doesn't have to be an individual agent lawgiver for there to be a prescriptive like value that we discover. What's hidden here are the premises. And this is why when we talk about morality, I talk about well-being, and that we're physical beings in a physical universe, and the facts of that physical universe dictate how the consequences of our actions impact us. And so the reason that it would be, for example, wrong to punch someone in the face is that this does harm to them. And if we begin with the principle of they are sovereign over their body, you don't have the right to harm them without their consent, unless they violate other social constructs here. All of this is still about us recognizing principles, but we do it intuitively for some of these. We have this sense of justice or sense of fairness where somebody does something and you're like, that's fucking wrong. Like, I can't explain why. I don't know how. I didn't need anybody to tell me. You're just like, that's wrong. And what it is that is at the core of this is empathy. It is our ability to look at how that impacts someone else, imagine how it impacts us, realize that we don't want it to be that way, and then say, nobody should have to deal with that. And so it becomes this think globally, act locally, or ask yourself, what would the world be like if everybody took that action? Or what would the world be like if we permitted that action? And so you are still engaged in the same sort of appeal to well-being that myself and Sam Harris and others have talked about. So, yes, that higher law needs to be clearer, and we are constantly seeking that perfect higher law in order to codify it for the people who can't intuit it and don't exercise empathy. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah, thank you so much for the elucidation. I guess this is just like one of my first times that I've been able to actually bounce this off of someone else. So I really appreciate.
No worries. And by the way, I would say that anybody who can use elucidation in casual conversation and use it correctly shouldn't be nervous about speaking to people. So, good job.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I get it. Not everybody's cut out for the phone at all. Not everybody's cut out for talk shows. Not everybody's cut out to defend their positions. That's all fine. For those people who are like, oh, Matt only wants professional blah blah. No, I'm happy to talk to anybody. Let's get it going. It's just I'm not going to let people spout bullshit, and I'm not going to let people talk and act like they know shit they don't know. But I don't know the answer to all of that either. But thanks for the question, Jack. We have Aaron, pronouns are he, him, in Oregon, has a question about the relationship between the existence of randomness and the necessity of determinism. How can one justify compatibilism with no proof of randomness? Wow. I read all of that, Aaron, and despite being a compatibilist, I'm going to sit back and let you, welcome to the line. This is you're on the line because I want to. Maybe you can state your question and I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah. I realized even after I wrote it that I probably framed it from the point of view of my own internal conversation versus what I actually meant. So here's basically what I think I'm a compatibilist. I'm not really sure on what the definitions mean, but I know I'm not a hard determinist. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that turned to a conversation about free will. And I don't think we have libertarian free will. I don't see any evidence that that's possible.
Good.
But I do think that we have a will, whether how free it is. You know, I've heard you say that multiple times, and
yes,
I really resonate with that. He asked if I believe in randomness, and I said, well, I'm not. I don't think that random as in rolling a dice or anything like that is truly random, but I can't say that at a quantum level or something like that a randomness. Anyway, I said I wasn't convinced that randomness isn't possible. And he was flabbergasted by that fact. And he said that it's impossible for anything to be random. We just maybe can't measure the amount of randomness. So that made me really question, is randomness at all possible? And then I went down the line of thought of if randomness is in fact not possible, does that necessitate hard determinism? Or how could one accept that randomness doesn't exist yet also be a compatibilist? Or, you know, I'm kind of
okay. Yeah. When you pause, we're confusing several terms here. So
yeah.
Determinism, hard determinism, or soft determinism is tied to whether or not randomness is possible. That's all separate from compatibilism, which is about whether or not free will of some variety is compatible or incompatible with determinism. And it doesn't matter whether it's strong or weak determinism. So set aside free will and compatibilism for a moment and just talk about determinism and randomness. And by the way,
right.
I'm much better on the free will issue than I am on determinism and randomness. But here's my thoughts. If randomness isn't possible, hard determinism must be true. The world is either strictly deterministic or there are quantum fluctuations. And whether or not that's true randomness in the sense that, you know, completely beyond any ability to predict, or if it's just so complex that we can't identify what the pattern is, I don't know. And I don't think it matters, because then when you move to compatibilism, which is the notion that we have some will that is free enough, irrespective of whether determinism is true, randomness is irrelevant, because randomness doesn't grant you will. Your will isn't an exercise of will, is not randomness. It can't be accounted for by randomness. Your will is what your will is. And even if your will was determined, it still is what it is. So randomness impacts whether or not determinism is weak or strong. And determinism, from a compatibilist perspective, is irrelevant to whether or not we have free will. It's basically a response to people who are saying, if determinism, then there is no free will because everything's determined. And Dennett, who, as far as I know, is the individual who coined compatibilism for this, is saying, no, even if determinism, there is a version of free will that is compatible with that. And for me, the example I've used a billion times, which is a gross exaggeration that I willfully opted to use now, or was forced to use because I don't have free will, is this. When Sam Harris and I were on stage, I was like, Sam could jump off the stage and land there and stand there. That is an act of his volition. Whether or not it was deterministic or not doesn't matter. Or I could throw Sam off the stage and he could stand up. And at that point, we would be in the exact same scenario with regard to our physical positioning, but I will have used my will to override his will. He didn't want to end up down there, but I imposed my will upon his. It doesn't matter whether it was predetermined that I would impose my will over his. That's what happened. And what we care about when we talk about this was an act of free will is the moral accountability for an action.
Right.
And whether determinism is true or not, if I throw Sam off the stage, I am the actor whose will is responsible for violating Sam's will. And that responsibility is what we care about. And so I had a talk with Rationality Rules a couple years ago where he took me to task on some of this, and it changed the way I talk about free will a bit. Like, I don't know how free our will is. I do still hold to compatibilism a la Dennett, where he talks about in Elbow Room, the varieties of free will worth wanting. One of the best books on the subject. He talks about, I can't flap my wings and fly. I can't leave the earth. So merely pointing out the constraints that I have doesn't change the fact that my will isn't unfairly constrained. It can be constrained by obvious physical containments. But all we really care about is when my will is constrained by another agent, or what is perceived as another agent, because that's where our sense of justice and injustice come from. That's where our sense of moral accountability and responsibility come from. And that's where free will matters. It doesn't matter in the realm of determinism.
Okay. So it basically, because I think we got pretty granular on it, and that's why it seemed like, he was bringing up the choices, which I've heard lots of people say, well, I choose which way to turn at a stoplight. I choose to go straight or turn right here, or, those type of things. And I think he was trying to say that if we can say that hard determinism is true, then that obviously isn't a choice at that level, at the way he was trying to define will, right? The freeness of our will. And I said, well, but what do you have to show that nothing can be random? Because I think, how, if at all, even if there was a possibility of it, hard determinism couldn't be true, right? You could at least be soft deterministic with an account, and I'm sorry, I don't want to go on too much longer. But
for the record, so I'm as dubious as you are when someone says randomness cannot exist.
Right.
I don't know how they reach that conclusion. I don't know how that is a positive assertion for which I don't see warrant. Despite that, if he would have said, I don't think true randomness is possible, I would probably agree with him, because my suspicion after looking at this is that it's reasonable to suspect that everything is a pattern. We just aren't able to identify it, that our limitations prevent us from seeing the pattern. But to say that must be the case, which is what your interlocutor is saying, I don't know how you got there. I mean, I don't know how he got there. So
yeah, I don't either. And I think that it was just kind of taking it axiomatically as that has to be, and building from there. And we had to stop the conversation because I couldn't even show him an example of a way that, how would you tell the difference between this being random or not? And the example I used was, the examples I've heard from, other biologists and such is the randomness in evolution, and it's not the mutations that are random, it's which out of the population get the mutation. And as far as I know, there's no, we can't determine which out of a given population will receive the mutation that, you know, provides toward that. And that was the example. I said, I gave that example is how could you tell if that is in fact a randomness or it is exactly predictable? We just can't tell. And and we couldn't get past that point because he couldn't tell me how we could tell the difference then.
Yeah, I don't think that process is random. I think that process is deterministic. It's just that we don't have the ability to access it. So for example, it's not individuals that evolve, it's species that evolve. It is groups that evolve. And so if you've got a group and you say there's an X% chance that this particular gene is going to mutate, that percent chance is available to all of them potentially, but only because we're viewing things with regard to populations, and that's populations that evolve. If instead we knew everything about the two individuals and we knew that one of the two of them was going to have this mutation transmitted, we would be able to identify that if we knew absolutely everything about them, is what my suspicion would be.
Okay. That makes sense.
But I'm not an evolutionary biologist. My limitations, I could do a 10-hour lecture right now on snake genetics. And breeding snakes. And that's not even a joke. 10 hours would barely get me started. But yeah, on randomness, determinism, if randomness isn't possible, then that would be, as far as I can tell, hard determinism. But that's completely separate from what happens in population evolutions and at the individual level. It's like radioactive decay. That the half-life, we know the rate at which it decays, but that you can't tell for any individual atom. That would be a much better example than gene changes in a population.
Great. Okay. That's a great point. That's a great point. Okay. And regardless of the state of determinism we're kind of bound to, it says nothing at all about our compatibilism and the amount of will, how free that is. Okay.
And I don't know how free our will is.
Yeah. Neither do I. I just couldn't figure out how he took such a hard line on it and where he was basing that claim from, and it left me confused. And so I just wanted some clarification. Thank you, Matt.
Sure. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. Thanks. I was trying to type a quick message to somebody in chat, but my fingers fumbled and typoed all of it. Somebody in chat said they couldn't even do 10 hours on snakes and ladders. And I'm like, I couldn't either, because that's a far simpler topic. Snake genetics is, there's so much to cover. Don't get me started. One of these days we're going to do it because I want to, and it's going to be all about snakes and snake genetics. It's probably going to happen when we get our first clutch of eggs, which I've been working on the incubator, and any day now, I want to get us an ultrasound, but we just don't have the money to add an ultrasound to the breeding project yet. And because I'm not a vet, I don't know enough about it to do it. Final call for tonight's Cuz I Wanna. Spencer from Japan is calling to ask a question about the consistency of Islam. So Spencer, welcome to the line. You're on Cuz I Wanna.
Yeah, hello. My question was, hello?
Yep, you're still here. Yeah.
Okay. So, if God can see people and people cannot see God, so that would be the definition of God.
How is that a definition of God? That God can see people and people can't see God? That's not a definition of God. That's a proposed state of affairs.
But that could be my definition. No.
What use is your definition of God? It doesn't tell me anything. Is your God a thinking agent? What does it do? What does it think? Just telling me that it's something that can see me that I can't see doesn't tell me anything at all about it.
Well, yes, it does.
Does the fact that you're constantly laughing every time you say something, is that relevant to the call? Are you waiting to get to a punchline? Because you're not going to get to it.
Just very nervous talking. Sorry.
Okay. So it says here that you wanted to ask if Islam is consistent. And now when I get you on the phone, you're saying, what if God can see us, but we can't see God? And what if that's the definition of God? I'll take you at your word. Oh, I guess Spencer hung up. I was going to take him at his word that this was a nervous condition, because I am aware that people do have nervous conditions like that. Spencer, if you were having a real nervous condition, my apologies. But as somebody who hosts a call-in show, it's very hard to tell, especially when the content of what somebody's saying is not particularly cogent and it's accompanied by snickering behind the scenes. So here, let me answer both your questions. Is Islam consistent? Consistent with what? Consistent with the facts of reality? Not that I can tell, but you can tune into the debate tomorrow and see what we actually get to on that. I'm going to keep working. We're going to go to Super Chats here in a minute to kind of close this out. And I've got my list of them up, but I'm going to keep working starting early in the morning to make sure that the debate opening that I do tomorrow addresses the topic as specifically as he's decided to present it with what is or isn't true. Also, I seem to be punched in much tighter than normal on this show.
Yeah. So
what did you do, honey?
This super chat window has 2 people, including myself. And so on the fly during the show, I tried to make it just for you, and I thought I did a pretty good job until you got on here and your head was clipped.
It's like, see if I can. That's right. I can scoop back a bit. Yeah, you do whatever you want to do. You go ahead and adjust it. We can do this. There's only a handful of super chats here.
There we go.
For us to worry about today. Ooh, that didn't work.
What do you mean?
I clicked the button to put a specific super chat live, and it did not go live. So let me try this again.
Yep, they're not coming through. Shit, hold on.
They're not coming through.
Let's see. I don't even know what this one is from.
Yeah, I don't think that's not pulling from the queue. Let me read them. You just put me full screen. There's like 7 of them. I think I have all of them. So let's knock this out. From Larry Fishman. Gender roles are largely a recent innovation for most of the human species. For most of the last 2 million years, everyone hunted, everyone gathered, and everyone was expected to defend the children in a fight. Yeah, there are certainly true aspects to that. What we now have as the gender roles in society have changed as societies have changed, and they're often different between cultures. They do begin from recognized differences in phenotype because that's what determines which roles people are more suited for. If for the people who can run faster, lift more, those types of things, that begins to define those roles. And then what we find later on is that as humanity expands and the increase in incredible diversity, nobody has to be remanded to the boxes of the past anymore. The people who were once perceived automatically to be good at something may be still good at it and not the best. And what we're doing that is wrong, by the way, I can still hear you typing. What we're doing that is wrong with regard to those roles is not so much merely saying, tell me what a woman is, tell me what a man is, let's define it, let's put them in a box, let's ignore the fact that there may be other boxes or anything else. We're failing to recognize that the boxes themselves are causing a problem. I know the people on the right, you put your MAGA hat on and you're like, oh, there's no such thing as toxic masculinity. Yes, there is. Yes, there absolutely is. Because what we're talking about with gender is not about sex or gametes or what's in your pants. It is quite often about masculinity versus femininity and where you are on a spectrum related to those concepts, which are absolutely constructs. And as soon as you have that, you're going to have extremes. And as soon as you say, here's a man does this, and a manly man does this, and the most manly man does this, and I'm the alpha man, I'm Nick whatever, and I'm going to do this, and this is it. You're now creating a cartoon which also puts undue pressure on every other man out there to be man enough. And it creates an absolutely toxic environment. If instead you were to recognize that there are men, there are women, there are people who are varying degrees of either one or neither, and all of them should be treated with dignity, and all of them should have rights, and all of them can potentially do all the various roles. Now it goes away. What difference does it make to you if a pregnant person is a man, woman, or neither on the gender spectrum with regard to masculinity and femininity? What you know is if they're pregnant, they almost certainly have a womb. That's it. You don't know anything else. You don't know anything about their chromosomes. You don't know anything about their gametes. You don't know anything about their genitalia. And none of it matters. The things that we're obsessing over don't matter when the simple solution, just to treat people with dignity and respect who they are, should be enough. Continuing on, I'm gonna keep clicking the send, even though it's not sending it anywhere, just in case Arden gets to see it. Clayton Smith says, will there be merch available soon? Because I want to rep the best call-in program in the world. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Hashtag Fergalburger.
Yes, there's merch
Arden
coming.
Go for it, babe. Tell
No,
them.
I mean, so we've got a whole system planned for there to be lots of merch coming in the very near future. So people keep asking about this and the debate show and the Line X, which if you're not subscribed to, you should definitely go check it out. We don't have hard dates on any of that stuff yet, but it's all coming within the next like month or two, I suspect. So
yep,
it's right on the cusp. So definitely keep your eye out for all of that.
I had my note here to promote the Line X as well. That's where we might put the dirty stuff. I think that should that's the line. Welcome to the line. If you want to see the dirty stuff, look for the Line X. But yeah, it's going to be a different channel with different content, specifically so that we don't end up with monetization issues or getting shadow banned on stuff like this. But $10 from Jackie Knoll with no message at all. Thank you so much, Jackie. I greatly appreciate it. $9.99 from Clayton Smith, sending this just in case Matt only reads super chats over $10, because Clayton had previously sent in the one about merchandise being available. So Clayton's already, he wants merchandise so bad that he's already paid probably the price, most of the price for a t-shirt right out of the back, right out of the gate. So thanks, Clayton. I tell you what, when we start doing merch, if you want a t-shirt, I'll get you your first one. Just remind me. Clayton Smith, see, that's what you get for being proactive and pushing for the channel and being awesome. Kraken Zero, $20, who's also awesome and incredibly generous. Thank you. In my discussion with a psychiatrist friend, not all mind states would be fully morally culpable. For example, in manic phase, the brain is misfiring and a person can do and say exactly the opposite of their previous behavior. Yeah. It's still, the agent is still responsible. Just like when my car misfires, it may or may not be because of the gas that was put in there, which may go back to, blaming one person or another or faulty this or that. But the car itself is still broken and needed repair. I think if we did a better job of learning about the mind and psychological conditions, we could then do a better job of realizing that, hey, if somebody went on a shooting spree and it was because they had a tumor in their head, as what seems to be the case with the University of Texas shooting, that if the tumor is removed and that individual recovers, they are no longer a threat to other people in that sense. Our sense of vengeance and our sense of justice are both warped, where we feel that agent, that person needs to pay for what they did. And to some extent, that's the case. But as we begin to learn more about this, we may be able to free people from the very things that make them hostile to society and make them productive members of society, and use that to teach other people about this as well. Maybe we, I don't want to, when I'm getting calls from Uganda about, LGBT rights, and I don't have solutions for my own country, I don't know how we're going to get to the fantasy Star Trek type future where we can fix a lot of the problems that are creating and exacerbating more problems. But yeah, that's good. Thanks, Kraken. $5 from Pibblepunk. We cannot perceive the difference between a universe that is truly random and one that is deterministic. What's it matter? Agreed. Until I use that for everything. Until you can show me how to tell the difference between A and not A, I'm stuck. How do you tell a universe that had to be created by a god if you only have one universe to investigate? How do you reach that conclusion? I don't know what you would have to do that, but we haven't been able to do it yet. How do you tell the difference between a god that doesn't exist and one that is just intentionally hiding from our perception? You don't. You're kind of stuck there. Kathleen Moncrief, $10.69. Yes, please, for the snake show. Oh, that's going to happen. I mean, don't get me wrong. My mission remains the same. Yes, I left the atheist experience and then was essentially booted from the atheist community of Austin over it. My mission remains the same. I have an unquenchable, an insatiable need to have the conversations about religion, skepticism, humanism, the things. This is me. That's just going to happen until the day I croak. But I also have other interests and I have other little obsessions. It's one of the reasons why I love the fact that I started doing the hang up on Wednesdays, because whatever I'm hung up on gets to be the show. And now with Jimmy basically saying, hey, if you feel like doing, a show because you want to, you can do that. And we can have those shows. Tonight's was supposed to be about debate prep, and I did get some thoughts about the debate. So thank you very much to the people who raised those issues. I'll make the best use of them that I can when I actually get around to debate prep. And there were some interesting calls here and a couple of kind of weird calls. But yeah, there's going to be snake shows. There's probably going to be, I was going to say sex shows, but I mean shows about sex work and things like that, because I did a podcast today in India. I was invited on. It was in India and or Bangladesh, where most of their fan base is. And they invited me on because they knew me from the atheism stuff. But even though I did like an hour and a half, the majority of the questions were about sex work, gender, abortion, trans rights, things that had nothing to do. There was like a 15-minute opener where we talked about my background, which is great because I don't want to talk about it. I've talked about it a million times. Who I am and how I got here is irrelevant to whether or not what I'm saying is rational and good for the world. But I'll give those talks because that's what people are interested in. But we spent so much time on trans issues and sex work and everything else. We'll do that here. Some of the sex work stuff will probably be on Line X. But £5 from Faye. For Islam to be true, the Quran needs to be the word of God. So the pro position needs to state the method for establishing that. You are absolutely correct. I have a note down that is not quite verbatim that, but that is tied exactly to what I said, where if we find a problem with the Quran, that's going to disqualify it as being true. But even if we don't, the Quran could be completely without flaw, without contradiction. And that doesn't mean that what it's saying and what it's talking about are necessarily true. I feel like I have like something on my tooth, but I got it off. John Muir, $5. Great show as always. Hashtag Team Arden. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Perfect. Thanks, John. Electric Base 100, $9.99. Hot. Your analogy between mutation and individual nucleotides versus evolution and individual members instead of a population hit me in a way of analogies I've heard. Top 3. Well, thank you, Joel. That's what it says at the end of it. I appreciate that. I sometimes I come up with analogies on the spot. Other times I'm kind of correcting analogies because I happen to think of something better. Analogies are always going to fail at some point. That's the thing you've got to remember. They're analogs. They're not digitals. And so use them as much as you can until they break, and then find other analogies to fit in and fill in those breaks. And when you overlap analogies, that's when you can help someone understand a topic that they're otherwise not going to understand far better. Murray's 201-499, how can I get in touch to help with your podcasts? That's an interesting question. Should be down below. Is it down there? You can email calltheline@gmail.com. It's down there on the socials. That is there. There's also, how do you get the Discord information?
I don't know. So I haven't been around long enough on the Discord stuff to know how much we share that out. But I can say that YouTube has introduced a podcast feature where they kind of do it all on their back end, and we are looking into using that. So we might actually not even need to hire anyone. I don't know exactly what Jimmy's plans are for you integrating that, but I think that's the way we're probably going to go. So hopefully again, no hard dates, but in the very, very near future, that will also be up.
All right. I have 4 super chats left, and then I get to let Arden roll out the ending credits, and then I can go pee and relax. Because as usual, I drink a lot, and the medication makes me have to pee regularly. So Galleon 1991 said, how do you make the distinction between moral virtue and moral obligation? Isn't it just a continuum of how much well-being something produces? No, it has nothing to do with a continuum of well-being. The difference between a moral obligation and a moral duty, I tend to use examples. If there's a child standing in the street and a bus is coming towards him, and I can, with no risk to myself, grab that child and save them from being run over by a bus, as long as there's no risk to myself, I would say that is a moral obligation to take that action. And failure to take that action may be legal, but would be immoral. If I can save that child, and in doing so puts myself at risk, I'm no longer obligated to do it, but if I did do it anyway, that would be a moral virtue. In the same way that donating money to a charity may be morally virtuous, but it's not a moral obligation. I could donate every last penny that I ever make to some charity, and I would get applauded as a morally virtuous being. But if I fail to give all of my money to a charity, that does not mean that I am now a moral monster. That's kind of the best 2 examples of that I have come up with over the years. $10 from James Call, the Manly Man's Manual from Men from Manitoba. From Men from Manitoba. I left out a syllable. Put hands on hips and give out a manly laugh. Oh, I should be standing like this. The Manly Man's Manual from the Men of Manitoba. There you go. I'm pretty much a trained monkey at this point, so I don't mind. $10 to Jackass. Thank you so much for the opportunity to call in. You did a great job clarifying, but I'd love to talk again to perhaps better clarify my question and learn about philosophy and theology. Sure. Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. Another one from Larry Fishman, who just quickly rose to one of my favorite people. The early 21st century in the Star Trek universe was a nightmare of authoritarianism and nuclear war, so I'd say we're on the right track. You're correct. You're correct. Once we get to, once we produce Khan, I guess we'll be on our way. But yeah, thanks for that, Larry. That is true and well worth noting. $5 from Al Bundy. Oz, Matt, please come back to Australia. I missed your last visit and would love to see you live. I'd be happy to. Here's the thing. And this is not, me, one of my biggest downfalls, which Jimmy will beat me up about, is like, I don't do the give us money, give me money, give me money. My YouTube channel is monetized and yet not finished. I still haven't made a penny off YouTube. And every time I say that, I feel both good and guilty about it, but it's got to get fixed. When I came to Australia, it was I can point you to the people, but there were several individuals that worked with different organizations that raised money specifically to bring myself, Aron Ra, and Seth Andrews down there as the Unholy Trinity, because it is incredibly costly to fly halfway around the world and go to speaking events like that. You have to know that you're going to sell tickets, and we did sell tickets, and I think they actually made a profit in the end from all of it, which was great. I think some of those same organizations currently have or recently have had Dr. Daryl Ray down there. He just messaged me from, I think, Perth, about some individuals there who were grateful that what I had done had directed them to recovering from religion and allowed them to get involved with the community, to meet Daryl. And I'm grateful for all that. I got invited to India today, provided we can work out security concerns, but it's also the financial stuff. I used to tour with the Magic and Skepticism show. I can't restart that because it would take all the rest of my savings, essentially, to take a risk on restarting a tour there. And because of what we're doing with the snakes and other stuff, I can't go on long tours. And I don't want to really go on super long tours. I want to go to events, work for a day or a few days, get to meet everybody, and then come back home. I would be happy to go to India or Australia, provided there's enough interest so that someone can arrange it, pay for it, and not go broke doing it. That's neither me nor the organizers should go broke trying to do it. But I appreciate the enthusiasm. I'd love to come back. I love Australia. And by the way, Australian pythons are some of my favorites. We have 2 womas. I would go get one right now, but he's in quarantine. And the other one is really bitey. We're gonna work with her. I still have marks on my finger from the other day when she bit me. It doesn't hurt. It's not a problem. But womas right now on my wish list of snakes, in addition to dry marking, are I want an albino Darwin's carpet python, because they tend to stay smaller. And I've always loved carpet pythons, and albino Darwins would fit the bill there just fine. And they're available here. It's just harder to find. And finally, from Friendly Neighborhood Steve, $10. Thank you very much, Steve. Good luck with the debate, Matt. # Team Mayo. I really appreciate that. I've done more and more debates with Muslims. For some reason, as soon as I did 1 or 2 with Modern Day Debates, James over at Modern Day Debates just keeps contacting me. He's like, hey, I found another Muslim that wants to debate you. I found another Muslim that wants to debate you. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I like doing it. It creates content. It's a little different from what I've done in the past. And so tomorrow, someone is going to try to defend the notion that Islam is true. And specifically, they gave a handful of tenets that they were willing to defend, namely that Islam is the last message of God and there will be no more messages or messengers. I wonder how you prove that there were any messengers before. That's interesting. We'll probably get into that. I don't know how you prove that there have ever been any messages or messengers from God, let alone that Muhammad is the last one. Premise number 2 essentially is that Islam cannot be a man-made religion. Curiously, and from my debate opponent, I'm definitely, unless I forget, going to be asking you, are all the other ones, can they all be man-made? What is distinct about Islam that shows you that it can't be man-made and all the others can? Because if any of the others can't, then wouldn't they also be evidence of a God? And now you have multiple gods in conflict when there can be supposedly only one. And then the final proposition is that the Quran is infallible. I don't know that I'm going to spend a lot of time going through a list of potential flaws in the Quran from a factual standpoint, like where the Bible says bats are birds. I think we could find problems like that within the Quran. Certainly, I fully expect on the bingo card that we didn't make that we'll hear a little bit about prophecy. We'll hear a little bit about scientific things in the Bible and how the only way that Muhammad could have known this is if it was revealed to him by God. I think those are going to be used to suggest that the Quran must be of God and that Muhammad was a prophet. It's all, I think every time I debate Muslims, it's just going to be, oh, here's something neat that science found out later. And it's never what science found out later. It is a way to, after science discovers something, go back and reread your Quran and see if you can find a passage that might be read or misread in a certain way to make it seem as if it's saying something close to the same thing. And that is not in any way a demonstration of truth or the necessity of God. And if it were, why the hell doesn't Allah show up right now and say, wow, you guys figured it out. You came up with a logical argument that demonstrates that this must have been from me, so I can stop fucking hiding now and come out and interact with all of you in an honest fashion, rather than much like the God of the Jewish Bible and the Christian Bible being the world champion of hide and go seek for all eternity. Thanks everybody for hanging out with me tonight. Cuz I Wanna. I'll do the debate tomorrow at noon, and I'll see the rest of you on Sunday on the Sunday Show with Jimmy.